So thanks. My background is more, let's say, signal processing, machine learning, and social robotics. But since several years now, we have been working a lot with people at PTS mainly in autism spectrum disorders. So what I will show you is of course a result of this kind of collaborations. But I will also show you what the plans that we have and some of the works we have been doing. And mainly, probably the main point that I want to highlight is that probably you have if you look to let's say to social interaction and how it works, you could have a look to the different kind of people and how they try to interact with the others. They exchange a lot of what we call social signals. And you have experts here around the table. So you have different kind of dynamics, and each of the signal has its own dynamic. If you take a gesture, I said that my background is in signal, so it depends on the time. Now, if you look to speech, and unfortunately now we are used, and it was quite interesting, the previous also presentation that was very interesting about habits. But we are also changing a bit the way we are doing presentations, because I don't know when you did the last presentations in front of other people. Maybe it's starting, but it changes also the multimodal interaction that we have. For example, gesture and speech is quite specific. We have also the interpersonal interaction, and this is more about what I will speak today. And here I give an example. If you look to the people here, they have a gaze, and you can gaze in response to pointing at the partner. So it's starting to be a more elaborated kind of interaction. Of course, there are other dynamics that I will not discuss today. For example, group dynamics is something that we are investigating also in my group, but I will not discuss that today. So I will really focus on this idea of we have social signals that are obviously multimodal. They can be some of them objective, subjective. So there is already a challenge to detect them. I will not discuss too much about multimodal perception, but of course we need these kind of tools to do it. And I will more discuss about how we can take that and put that on and how we can use that for maybe investigating or developmental disorders that I will show you. And mainly if this will be autism spectrum disorders, but not only. So we will discuss other disorders. So usually if you think about the models, what you could easily do probably is just to think about you do something like I have some signals, and I can just have what we call telegraphist model. So basically, I just send a message, you receive a message, then you give me a feedback. So this is very simple, and it makes sense. But it makes sense most for computers, not really for humans, because humans, we argue, and we are not only the only people that are doing that. We probably will not have time today to discuss that, but other domains are doing that. We think about connected individuals. That's the perspective that we have. So this perspective means that we are interdependent. So there is kind of a dependency between the people. We are not doing that alone. I'm doing something because you are here. Sometimes it's not explicit. Sometimes it is. We play a role. If we want or not, we are playing a role. Of course, we can switch between roles, but we play a role. And this is something that is really important, is that we are not in this simple model that we switch between I receive or I send and I give a feedback. No, we do all that together. So we are multimodal, and we are really able to speak and listen and listen and speak, and even speaking without speech. For example, if you look to the guy here, you can say, okay, he's just listening, but not really, because you look to there is a gaze, there is a face, there is maybe non-verbal signals that are here that play a lot of role in that. So what I want to show you is that what happens if now we take this perspective, I mean, that we have connected individuals, and we try to check how we can use that to investigate neurodevelopmental disorders. So maybe the best is to show you a video of some works. So what you will see here is a work that we have been doing with colleagues at Pitié-Salpêtrière, and this is something that we did some years ago. Of course, we can change the perception, and now there are other tools, but I think the idea is really similar. Is what we can do, and you will have a kind of signals that we can use there. So here, these are the typical experiments. So you have an infant and parent doing interaction. So we collect some data. So here it's with the Kinect, some movements. But what is interesting is that you can build a front view, a top view. So that's really interesting also for clinicians. And from the top view, it's an example that what we have been doing is to try to investigate face-to-face engagement. So I look to you, you look to me, at me. That's really important. So gaze, for example. I can have task engagement, so not looking at the other, but still working, still playing together. I have a kind of proxemics, which is really important during interaction, but also who is taking the initiative to change the proxemics. That's really important. So these are very basic signals that make sense for let's say, for people to detect them, but also to use them in clinics. I will not show you here the results, but you get the idea is that with very simple signals, we can try to investigate this kind of interaction that we can make. Another example that we did some years ago is the ovaries. Okay, so here what you have is what we call infant-directed speech, and this is a specific prosody that let's say parents are using. So what you could see here between adult and infant-directed speech is basically here the fundamental frequency. So it's a key features in a prosody in speech, and what you could see is exaggeration. So you exaggerate the fundamental frequency, but also the duration. So this kind of exaggeration is really interesting. And there have been a lot of debates about is it useful and why we do it? Why there is a need for in front of babies to change your voice, to change your behaviors. In fact, it's not only about speech. There are a lot of work showing that it's not only speech. You can change your motion also on that. So people are also usually using the terms motionist to show that we change also this kind of interaction. So just to show you what we have been doing with this kind of ideas is that okay, we have these movies. And the idea is to check what, in the same example that I showed you before, is that what is happening in the mother for the mothers when we have a mothers. So the mothers improves infant affective engagement. So that's the idea of using the mothers. And what is interesting is that we are able to, with the similar tools that I showed you just before, is to check also how the infant is responding to that. And what is interesting for us is really this kind of loop. Okay, we have a specific loop where we investigate how the mother is producing sounds, mothers, and how the infant is also responding to that. And of course, the response could be really multimodal. So if there is no need to have from audio, and you have only audio. We can do that with multimodal interaction, and that's the power of AI today, is really to quantify this kind of multimodal interaction. Instead of looking signal per signal, doing annotation per annotation, which is already difficult for doing that for one individual, here we can do that for two individuals, and in particular different, mother and infant in this case, and we try to investigate the loop. That's really important. And below what you have is on the top, it's really the model. It's really the interaction, the model, and the concepts. Then on the top, on the bottom, what you have is basically the social-cognitive development. So I will not probably spend too much time on that, but this is the result of what our colleagues in psychiatry they can take from the model. So they can then understand what are the rules of that. Of course, this is also based on let's say review of the literature, but now what is interesting is that you can try to quantify that and check what is happening. Of course, this kind of interaction is basically a long-term interaction. So the loop usually is translated. So we go from social signals, and this is translated in this kind of models. So what you see here is exactly the loop, the computational model. But here, all this kind of stuff is about what is happening from the data, what you see in the data. So what is interesting is that, for example, we see that this was for children that will develop autism. So it's really a long-term interaction. We were really happy, lucky to have really a data with a methodology that we call home movies. So people, you know, probably that diagnosis of autism is around 3 years, 2, 3 years, maybe 4 years. And people in PISA, so some colleagues in PISA, what they did is to also collect, after the diagnosis, collect videos, so real videos, so what we call home movies, and they have been analyzed by psychiatrists, but clinicians also with annotation, but also we did that by our models. And what we found here, it's just some of the models of the results, but what is interesting is that we see the same insights that, if you know a bit about autism, is quite similar. We see, for example, less oriented toward people, less intersubjective behavior, which is what we were expecting. But what is interesting is that the mother or the parents in general, they change their behaviors. They are not passive. They are not just observing that the children is going in another direction, and usually we call that deviant behavior. So it's not retardation. It's not something you do and then they will be fine. Yeah, they really. Of course, they are not able to put a name on the diagnosis because it's several years before the diagnosis. But what we see is already a change in the behaviors of the parents. For example, they use regulation up and touching, which you can think about is a kind of overstimulation. You try to stimulate, to change the stimulation. They use parentese, so which is the mother is infant-directed speech. So they try to change, to exaggerate. And this kind of stuff is really before the diagnosis. And this is really interesting. And what we are trying to do is to check also if, of course, we are interested by the development of the children, but it's impossible to do it or to investigate that without the environment and the direct environment of the children. That's the parents. That's what you have. So we try to have this kind of now there are a lot of works about digital markers, factors that we can try to have, you know, biomarkers that we have, but these are the markers that we think that looks like more a signature than something else, than really something like genetics. It's not that, it's still in behaviors, but looks like a signature. When you do a signature, we can recognize a bit what you are doing, but you can change it each time. But there is something there. So that's exactly what we plan to extract. Okay, so here an example of still in the same direction, but since we were discussing about the idea today is to discuss about AI and developmental disorders, what I wanted to show you is recent works that we have been doing, but probably in a developmental way. So means that the first development, and we were really happy to have this data, is fetal directed speech. So I put that as a question. So we were really lucky to we started an experiment some years ago. So this was only observation of pregnant women, and we were of course we still don't have a diagnosis or something like that. But what we were interested here is more what happened and which kind of interaction you have. So you don't, and if you think about the kind of interaction you have with your baby, if we want to say that, because sometimes it's not so clear for even for the mothers, in particular for the first babies. So we collected some audio data. So we have a recorder. We can this is stopped after 3 minutes, but we have 3 minutes of interaction, and they can do that. They are free to do that or not. So they can record or not. And we collected some interesting also information, of course, sociodemographic, but what was interesting for us was anxiety and depressive status. So there are specific scales for that. I will not discuss them, but there are some scales for specific for opinion. And there is life events, which is quite interesting also, is that you feel that someone else is here. So you feel an interaction. Okay. Okay, so what was interesting is that most of the mothers reported to speak to their fetus. So which is really maybe it's not surprising, but it's really interesting that there is an interaction. So when we speak about developmental disorders or even developmental psychology or psychiatry, we have also to take that into account. And this is a very simple method because we have already the infant-directed speech classification. And here what we did is to check, is there a correlation with what we have? First, is there a directed speech? Is there, do we have something like we change our speech? And in fact, yes, people and the mothers are changing their voice. So they don't use adult directed speech with the fetus, okay? Which is really interesting also for clinicians. But we were also interested by the fact what happened if you don't speak. That's more interesting for us because we are dealing with developmental disorders. And here what you can see, it's really interesting, is that maybe it's not so clear, but what is interesting is that when you the depression, the more future mothers were depressed, the less they spoke to their fetus, which is really interesting. So it comes also for interventions, and most of the stuff that we are doing and the stuff that I showed you before, it's also to make recommendations. So it's not specifically, we are not saying that we will develop audio recorders that will record your voice with your mobile phone each day and then say, okay, you didn't speak today to your fetus. That's not the idea. It's more about concepts and to prove that there is a need to promote interaction. And most of the works that I'm doing is a recommendation for clinicians. And probably for some of them, there is no need for AI, but there is a need for AI to show that the concept and to prove the concept. And then maybe here it's very simple. And what people, for example, were discussing with clinicians and medical doctors, okay, what you could do with that. And then they say, okay, that's very simple. We will just promote interaction with your fetus. Okay, that's very simple. And we will see if it works. Of course, it needs time also to do that. But some of the, and this is one of the message that I want also to show you, let's say, or at least to share with you. AI now we are discussing a lot of AI techniques, but sometimes you don't really need, but you need that on the loop of the audio process but not necessarily at the intervention space. Okay, so now we were in the fetus. Now I want to move to probably to adolescents or young children. And what I want to show you is a really concept that we use a lot in affective computing, social signal processing. Maybe you are aware of that or not, but I will just explain you very quickly and the context that I will take is stress. And I will show you just after why we use stress. But let's say this is an affective state. And usually what we do, so you have an affective state. So you have, so there is the question of elicitation of that. Here, for example, this was a mathematical test. So there are, of course, ethical questions, experimental questions that we can discuss. But here, what I just want to say is that you have an affective state. Okay, so how we do when we try to recognize that with machine learning. So you have your internal state, so we don't know, in fact, we just observe what some of the cues that you have, for example, body movement, action units, we were discussing about speech, so you have that. So usually people, what they do, they have what we call distal cues, and then what they can do is to collect the video. So let's say you have audio and video features. Then you can simply ask the people, have you been stressed here? Which kind of level? And it works for stress, but for a lot of social signals or emotion or affective states. And people do that. So you have a label. So what is interesting is that people in machine learning, they use the cues, okay, the features you extract, and the idea is to map that to the HEAL-SA self-assessment, okay, self-assessment. But you can also ask other people to look to the video, and they can look to the video and say, okay, are the people stressed or not? Okay. Usually we can do that with 1, 2, 3 people. It's maybe 10 people, and we can have agreements between them and check that because this is subjective. But this is interesting because this is another point of view. Okay, it's not self-assessment, it's another point of view. Today, you can also do that with crowdsourcing. There are also ethical questions and how you do that, but you could do that with crowdsourcing. So it means that you can also investigate that instead of having 1, 2, 3, 10, you can have hundreds of people, thousands of people looking at the same video. Of course, there are questions about the quality you obtain and things like that, but that's really interesting when you think about it, is that I have as how I see myself, self-assessment, and how people see me, okay, how they observe me. You can have, and what we added is something interesting for stress, not only for stress, but here we applied that for stress, and I will explain again why. We have internal cues. So what we did is to collect also physiological signals, very simple physiological signals that everyone can access to them. And what we did is to have a psychiatrist who is also a physiologist, which is really important. So he's able, or let's say, who is in today work, day work is looking to these kind of signals. And we asked him to evaluate the level of stress from this kind of signals. So here I have another point of view. I have a kind of a physiologist. Of course, I have really less because here we are discussing about experts. So you can have 1, 2. Here we have one for sure for all the signals. Sometimes we had 2, but not also. But the result that I will show you is only with 1. But that's interesting is that we have a way of investigating. And here you try to use the features to map self-assessment, but you can have the features to map to external observer, and you have the same features that you can map to physiological to the psychiatrist that is looking only to the physiology. And that's interesting is that you have exactly the same material, and with the AI you try to have 7 points of view, and what you do is just learning. And in some way, you are doing stupid things, is that you have the features, and you try to check what is happening. If I say that the ground truth is the person himself or herself, or external observers, or let's say an average or aggregation of external observers. And the last one is about physiological signals. That's really interesting. And why we did it? We did it because we were interested by a specific population that we call borderline adolescents. I don't know if you know them, but this kind of population, but they are the first insights of clinicians. They say that for example, they have a problem of controlling the emotions that they have. This is really important. This kind of to investigate this pathology, because for example, it can come to suicide, because people this kind of adolescents, they feel very bad, but no one is really seeing that. You can be even in the family with teachers and so on, and you don't see that in terms of, and you have been probably looking to a lot of examples where you have or situations where you see or you hear about, okay, you have a suicide, but I was not aware. If I know, I will do something on that. So what are the assumptions is that there is a difference between self-perception, okay, and the hetero-perception. And if you remember what I showed you just before, it's basically what we want to do with the machine learning is, could we separate self-perception with hetero-perception? And of course, so we have still the features. What is interesting is that we have no vagal, so the features that I show you. In the work, we were also able to collect some hormones. I will not discuss about it today, but I can we can discuss that after. Is that we have also this kind of features, which is a bit another point of view of physiological signals that we can extract here. So let's look to a bit to the results. So some of the results here, what I show you is just the self-perception and the hetero-perception. So you have borderline and control. So we just have human rating of stress during the experiment. So we ask people. So we have self-perception. So we ask the people, and hetero-perception, we ask other people to have a look to the signals of the others. So what is interesting is that when you look to borderline and control, here the borderline will mostly or they feel more stressed, or when you observe them, you see that they are more stressed. You see also something important, that's just on the ratings, there are differences between between self and hetero perception. That's really interesting. So this was only a notation, and already there you can see this kind of difference. And it's quite interesting, even for controls, not only for borderline, but even for controls. And it has a lot of impacts also in the affective computing community, because we can also think about what we are doing when we say we recognize this kind of affective states. Normally, we should, if we want to be rigorous, we should also say how the annotation has been done. Because probably if I have exactly the same material, I change just the point of view of the interaction, I may find other results. It doesn't mean that this is bad. It just means that this is different. Okay. So now what we did is, so you have the machine learning results with different kind of features that we extracted. So what we did is using self and hetero perception still. Okay, so we have still the self and other hetero perception, the borderline and the control. And what is interesting is that you can in some way play with which kind of features you want. You can use only behaviors, so body movements basically. Here we use behaviors, body movements and gestures plus facial landmarks, so action units. And we use also physiological signals. Since we have access to them, we also use that. And we use also multimodal interaction. But what is interesting is that when we look to the signals, when we have the multimodal interaction, there is no difference between self and hetero when we have controls. But for borderline, there is a difference between them. Okay, so and that was really interesting to see that. And also, if you look to the different kind of signals for behaviors, the difference is really important on that. Okay, for borderline, which is not the case for physiological signals. Now, if you look to physiological signals, we don't have a difference between self and hetero perception. Okay, that's really interesting, and we so there are some insights about what is happening inside this kind of adolescent. So now we are still using these tools to help also borderline. And here we can think again. There are two stuff that we are doing. One is recommendation again, but we are also thinking, because here there might be some stuff that we can help also adolescents to make some interventions, like having some serious games or things like that to help. You know that there are a lot of works about neurofeedback and one on biofeedback. And one of our ideas, could we set up new biofeedback systems that are also using this kind of point of view. Now, maybe to the rest of the presentation, I just wanted to switch maybe a bit to robotics, because I said that I'm also working on robotics. And again, here it's more a perspective that we take, so you can understand what we are doing after. So what we aim for is having a human. So this is robots learning from human teachers. So what we aim to use is to reverse the problem, basically, because usually in autism or neurodevelopmental disorders, most of the works that are about assistive devices or robots are more. I have a robot that's designed, so there is the AI, and the children. So the AI is here to help directly the children. Okay. So in some way, you are not changing the perspective of in clinics, because in clinics you have the therapist, the medical doctor. He has the knowledge, and the children is here to learn. But what we wanted to show also is that, is it possible to reverse the problem, to put the children in an active way, so they can really try to do the interaction in the another way. So what we said is having human teachers that they teach directly the robots. And for that, what is the idea is that usually we have in robotics, or this is also true for virtual agents. This is to have a human-centered approach, and we defined a new approach that we call robot-centered approach. I know that it's quite, let's say, polemics, because usually people are saying you should have a human-centered approach, but you will see that it's still a human-centered approach. It just will change the point. This picture, so this picture is not mine. It's more. So the concept is from us, but we didn't do a picture. But I like the picture that some people did from our work, so I usually use it, and this was very interesting. So what we usually do in robotics or with social agents is that you have a human that is interacting with other humans or interacting with robots, and you are happy when you compare the interaction, and you are happy because the interaction with the humans looks like the interaction with the robot looks like what you had with humans. But there is no reason. In fact, there is no reason to do that. But so that's one point from the robotics point of view. But there is another point of view, is more about what we are interested in clinics is not that. We are more interested by the fact that we want to compare humans. We don't care about robots. What we care about humans. And in clinics, what you should do is comparing two groups, okay, control and for example, borderlines or children with autism. So what we did is that could we use a robot that is really interesting because robots, if you think about what you could do with robots, is that they can do exactly the same thing with each group. So there is no problem of interaction between and to repeat the interaction between people. Okay. So what it is interesting is that to set up interactions. So one of the interaction where we did here, for example, is imitation. Imitation is interesting because this is quite simple. No need to make very complex interaction. And this is a very strong interaction between the children and the robots. And here, what we ask the children to do is very simple. Try to teach robots postures. Okay. So when you do that, there is very simple interaction, and we developed a machine learning technique that is a non-network. I will not give the details here, but the details you can find the details in this paper. But what is interesting is that there is an architecture that is very simple to learn how to match the behavior of the human to the robot. And interestingly, the robot, the agent, is able to increase the neural network, is able to increase the number of neurons during time. So what we did here is to check what is happening when you try to change the children. Okay, we change the children, we change the groups of children, we change also the morphology by having adults, for example. Okay, here what you could see is the time. We have different groups. So adults in red, children, typical children in green, and children with autism in blue. And what is interesting is that by the time, of course, you need more neurons, so artificial neurons for doing the task, so exactly the same task. But we showed that for children with autism, you need more. And there are a lot of explanations for doing that. And one of the explanations is that the children with autism are not good teachers for doing that. Each time they teach, they change the behaviors. To teach, you don't need, you should not change too much the behaviors because the posture are quite simple. And each time the children were doing a posture, they change a bit the posture. And by doing that, the AI system, the neural network, the machine learning system is impacted by that. Okay. So still in the quantification of behaviors. So what we did here is a long term, or let's say, or kind of trying to do some of the interventions that we could investigate here with neural networks. So what was interesting here is that we did an experiment during 6 months. And during 6 months, we had several interactions with robots, and here it was a very simple interaction. So it was only joint attention. Okay, and you see here on the right that the children is the robot is starting the interaction. Look at the cat, and we used a metric. That is very simple. Let's say a standard protocol that is very simple, inspired by people, by clinics, and in autism, joint attention is really important. And what we have been doing is just look on the right, on the left, so just gaze, and we check if the children is able to understand the intention of the robot. Then there is gazing plus pointing, and at the end there is gazing, pointing, plus suggestion. And what we record is something similar to what I showed you before, is the head orientation, and check what the children is doing. So to make it very simple, and here, or to make it very short, is that what is interesting is that we know what the robot is doing, and this is really important. So for the behavior assessment, now you have a way to really understand, to check what to analyze and when to analyze it, which is different from the stuff I showed you before. When we have the parent and the infant, it's not really controlled. Here, the robot is used to control the interaction. So we know when to analyze. So it's not far from experimental psychology in some way. And what we collected is the movement, the head orientation. I'm looking on the right, the left, or not moving at all. So these are the three clusters based on the images. And what you could see here is basically the kind of heat map, like what we do with gaze tracking or eye tracking with computers. What we did is just to check where you are looking at, okay? And these are the typical children. So they really, of course, you spend a lot of time at the middle because that's the task, but you always check on the right, on the left, which is not so clear for children with autism. For example, here, they were not looking at loads on the left. So you can investigate that and do exactly similar. And I know that clinicians and psychologists, they use a lot of eye tracking techniques to analyze, so they can do exactly the same thing. There is no need to change all the methodology. So maybe last thing that I want to show you is, okay, we show how to quantify, but still this is an agent, a social agent, and we wanted to see what is the support of the children and for example the engagement on that. And maybe you know that in social learning there are a lot of dimensions, and one of the dimensions is also I can have a partner, just a very simple partner that is just here helping me. And here these are we tried to have a longitudinal single case. So of course this is only single case, so this is a very let's say fresh data, but it's a single case. We want to go to but we wanted still to test if we can do something. And this was a children that has a dysgraphia. So he's really a severe dysgraphia. And one of the challenges, and he was refusing to do activities in clinics. Okay. So we said, and I can tell you that was a bit per chance, because clinicians were saying, what happened if you use your robots to teach the children and to engage? And of course, having a robot in front of you is more engaging. And but we were not sure, because what happened if it is a long term? So what we did is to have a lot of metrics. So the children is writing doing a lot of activities, and we can extract a lot of very simple features like writing, tracking, pressure, and because you use a tablet. And what we did is try to set up or to have a kind of model. So these are really the robot has a worse writing than myself. That was interesting, because the robot is still learning from the children. So of course it's worse than. So the children is in some way aware of that, aware that there is a problem. But if I improve myself, so this is a responsibility, protege effect. So there will be an effect. So this, what we expect is to increase the self-confidence and self-esteem. And of course, when you do a lot of training by gamification, we want to have something that improves. And that was the case in our work. So this comes to the idea of what we should optimize during interaction. And since several years, people were discussing about engagement, and even us, we were discussing about engagement that is really important in human-robot interaction, and this is true. And there were a lot of models, and still today there are a lot of models trying to optimize these behaviors. Okay, I see that engagement is interesting. So what I will do in my robot is simply to have an algorithm that is always assessing, monitoring the engagement and trying to, let's say, to have the best behaviors to increase the behaviors. But this is not true at all, because activities are really important. And here we just conducted work with colleagues at TPFL, is just to show that here you have two situations. So a situation where they are quite engaged below on bottom, it's about below you see engaged, they do interaction, they look to the robot and so on. And others, sometimes they are not really engaged and sometimes even not really doing interaction between themselves, but they have a collaborative task. But what we show is that, and what we propose is what we call a productive engagement. And what we found that was really interesting is that it's not necessary to be really engaged to have the good performance in a task. And that's important for us. I mean, for people in human-robot interaction, also to think about it is that the task is really important. When we propose AI systems, it's not about just proposing AI systems. And AI systems will not show that there is an improving in autism, but the task is important. The activity you do is important, and then the AI can help on that. But if you have a task when you learn nothing, you will learn nothing with AI or without AI. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you that it is also important today, and there is a clear need, in particular in autism, to think about, okay, we have all these applications, but what will happen in the life of people? And here it's, this is called Stratégie nationale pour l'autisme. So it's a French national strategy in autism that we have been working on that. And I think that was the first time, I think we started 3 years ago. That was the first time that we were thinking about technologies. Okay, we have AI, so what we could do. And there were a lot of, I have been invited to work on that, and people were thinking that, and I think that was one of the questions that they asked me to do, to think about it, how AI systems and information and communication technologies could help people. And my answer was, there is no, you can't, there is nothing you can do with that. Because my point is that it's important the activity you do and how you use it is more important than what kind of algorithm you put there. You can put the best AI system, but if you don't have an activity or you don't have a usability of that, you cannot use it. And this has been really accepted even by, of course, the government, but not only, and more importantly, by the people. I mean, people with autism spectrum disorders, families, and so on, because they are really lost in all the tools you can find. So just to show you examples of what we are doing, these are three projects that we are investigating. One is about Hemoface. So usually people, so we created a living lab, living and learning lab. This is a national living and learning lab. So any people can come to us. So companies, but also hospitals, teachers, and so on. And these are 3 examples of projects. We have others, but here these are the ones that they have been accepted by the steering committee. So one is about Hemoface, to recognize, to play with faces, and to help children to play with faces. One is about music, and it's not far from biofeedback and using feedback. And the other one is called Golia, and this is interesting because this is a game where you can play together. You have two tablets, one for the adults, one for the children, and we can play together. Okay, so that's all for me. So what I wanted to say is that today we are able to, so they have these techniques, they have proved to be efficient in capturing behavioral and social signatures for sure. But I think the task and the activity is fundamental, and we cannot show something if you don't have a good activity on that. And we are also thinking about translational research and evaluation. Research, it's mostly done, But evaluation, not really. We need to go till the usability, and this is a step that we are starting now to not really having only that. Okay, that's all for me, and thanks for your attention and all the colleagues.